Chapter 1. The Shadow of Hobsonville Church. The old iron gates of Hobsonville Church and Settlers' Cemetery groaned open, their rusted hinges shrieking like a tortured soul. Sarah, a young historian, stepped onto the cursed grounds of Hobsonville Church. The air was suffocating, laden with the stench of damp earth and the weight of long-buried memories clawing to be remembered. The church loomed before her, a skeletal shadow clawing desperately at the blood-stained twilight sky. Its stone walls were cracked and scarred, as if time itself had tried to tear them apart, hiding secrets that refused to stay buried. She was here to unearth the truth about a grave of Private Daniel French, 1985 to 1918, marked with the inscription Traitor. His file, full of twisted lies and gaps, weighed heavy in her bag like a dark secret waiting to escape. The village of Hobsonville had long whispered of his innocence, but their whispers drowned out by the official narrative. A shadowy figure stepped out of the church, its form sharp and menacing against the bleeding light of the dying sun, as if the darkness itself had taken shape. Father Rockwell, the village priest, his face twisted and worn, as though time had carved its marks deep into his skin, each wrinkle hiding a darker truth. He greeted Sarah with a hesitant nod, his gaze lingering on the weathered headstone that marked Daniel French's final resting place.
Private Daniel French was a traitor. His guilt is a stain on this place. Best leave it in the past.
The church's interior was swallowed by darkness, the air heavy with the smell of old incense and something rotting, like the walls themselves were slowly dying. Dust swirled in the dim light, drifting through the cracked stained glass windows, its once vibrant colours now faded and dull, like the church itself was slowly decaying. Father Rockwell led her to the archives, a room tucked away behind the altar, its silence heavy with unspoken truths. Sarah carefully navigated the labyrinthine shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of leather-bound volumes. Each page she turned, each faded inscription felt like a whispered plea from the past. She pored over the church's meticulously kept records, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The entries surrounding the war years were curiously vague, their silences speaking volumes. As days bled into nights, a sense of unease settled upon Sarah. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, too faint to decipher, yet impossible to ignore. Cold spots clung to her like invisible hands, sending icy shivers crawling up her spine. The church, she realized, was not just a repository of history, it was a vessel, its very stones imbued with the residue of past sorrows and simmering resentments. Chapter 3. The Restless Grave. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of purple and grey, Sarah found herself drawn to the graveyard. A strange compulsion led her to Daniel French's grave, the inscription barely visible beneath a layer of moss and lichen. As she knelt, a wave of icy air washed over her, stealing her breath. The air grew heavy with the sharp smell of blood and the bitter sting of gunpowder. A figure emerged from the swirling mist, its shape becoming clearer with every second. It was Private Daniel French, his uniform tattered, his face a mask of anguish and fury. His eyes, though, held Sarah captive, their depths swirling with an emotion that chilled her to the bone, an insatiable thirst for vengeance. Terror, sharp and cold, clawed at Sarah's throat. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The figure moved closer, his voice a hollow rasp, like it was coming from deep within the ground.
"They silence me in life, but they will not silence me in death,"
said the skeletal private in an angry voice. Chapter 4. The Weight of Silence. Sarah stumbled back, her heart pounding against her ribs. She fled into the church, seeking sanctuary in its dimly lit interior. She found Father Rockwell in the archives, his face pale as death, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation. He knew, he had always known. The truth unfurled like a poisonous bloom. Daniel French had been falsely accused, a scapegoat to protect a more heinous truth, a truth that implicated the church itself. Father Rockwell, bound by his vows and consumed by guilt, had remained silent, a prisoner of his own making. But some sins, Sarah realized with a dawning horror, could not be absolved, some truths too potent to remain buried. The church, built on a foundation of deceit, had become a conduit, a prison for both the accuser and the accused. As the clock chimed midnight, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the hallowed halls of Hobsonville Church. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the whisper of the wind whistling through the graveyard, a chilling testament to the price of truth and the enduring power of vengeance. Chapter 5. The Final Twist. The screen fades to black as the fog lifts, revealing Hobsonville Church restored to its former glory. New gravestones stand beside Private Daniel French's, etched with the names. Rockwell and Sarah. Inside the church, a new priest greets visitors. He glances at a freshly restored plaque commemorating Private Daniel French, now reading, "Innocent in life, avenged in death."